fourth series session in the People Like Us Wellbeing Chat series. The People Like Us project's hosting a series of wellbeing and mental health chats with our partners from West London NHS. So today we're joined by Ramandeep, who is a trainee clinical associate psychologist at NHS West London Trust. Today we are joined here to discuss representation and the impact it can have on your mental health and wellbeing. And hopefully Ramandeep will be able to answer some of your questions around this and provide you with some wellbeing tips. As always, we really love to get your feedback on the session and love to hear from you and know what other topics you want us to have as well. So in the comments, we've added a short question, so please comment and let us know. But for now, Ramandeep, welcome.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So my name is Ramandeep. I'm a trainee clinical associate psychologist within the West London NHS Trust. So I tend to work with clients who present in mental health crises, and I see them and work with them within the community as well as on inpatient wards. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about representation within this wellbeing chat, and I chose this topic as I believe it's quite important when it comes to impacting our mental health, but also within kind of my experience from working within the mental health sector in itself, and not only affecting me and my colleagues, but also the clients we work with, and how important it is for them to also see this representation, have this diversity when it comes to supporting them with their recovery journey. So yeah, to begin with, I guess, what is representation? So I guess it can be defined as something along the lines of kind of the portrayal of particular groups, communities, experiences, ideas, or topics. So some of the things that come to mind is kind of gender, age, ethnicity, class. And if we think about groups such as like dance groups, you might have a hip hop dance group. That's one kind of area of dance represented. Ballet dancing. And it's just a thing that's in our lives every day. And sometimes we don't even realize it. So one of the aspects of representation I wanted to touch upon is the representation in the workplace. So for me, when I say that, it's about the diversity with those involved in the team. So like I mentioned earlier, diversity could kind of consider the age, ethnicity, class, nationalities, and so on. And I think with having that representation, it helps bring a sense of belonging, which is so important to your mental health when you're adjusting to perhaps a new team. And also when you feel that sense of belonging, you feel comfortable and you feel able to maybe express ideas and just talk about things comfortably and in a safe space. So from my own experience, I've been pretty lucky, I'll be honest. All my teams have been quite diverse, but I guess there's still a lot of growth in kind of all areas when it comes to representation. And especially if I talk about kind of psychology in general, the departments of psychology, not within just West London, but I guess the whole of the UK, there is still so much work to do. You don't see, I guess, as many psychologists from a BAME background. But if you kind of look through kind of the processes that are going forward and kind of opening this up, they are trying to make it more inclusive. And I think by having so many more kind of psychologists from BAME backgrounds will hopefully kind of reach out the support to individuals who may have not reached out for support. And I guess, yeah, just increasing that inclusion for everyone, and making it more comfortable, safe space, letting people be heard when it comes to their mental health. And then I guess if we think about London in itself, it's such a multicultural city. One of the reasons why I kind of love living here. And you see so much representation when you're walking down the street, when you're on public transport, when you're in the park, wherever you are, there's someone who's got something that's kind of represented. So when we think about representation in the workplace, I think it's more of a systemic issue. So we think about maybe not the right goals being kind of pursued in the workplace, problems perhaps not being addressed properly, and therefore they'll keep kind of coming up again in the future. And it might even be kind of the culture that is there within the workplace, which makes it difficult to even implement change. So I guess it's like, why is that? Why is it so difficult to make that change? What do workplaces maybe need to do to make that change just a bit easier for teams to be a bit more represented, for people to start thinking, yeah, I do want to join that team. I guess just make it more likable in that sense. And then I guess it's also really important to talk about representation in the media, because that is something we're constantly exposed to every day. I mean, we've got mobile phones, we've got technology, it's everywhere. Wherever you look, it's there. And I think we can think about who and what do we see on TV in the media? How does this influence our perception? And perhaps even influence our goals? So are we more likely to pursue a career if we see someone else who's like us doing it? Is that a motivating factor in us kind of trying to pursue that? Or is it that we don't see enough representation that we then want to pursue that as a career to try and bridge those gaps where that is still lacking? And if I think about kind of myself growing up, I've grown up in London, so kind of in the Western culture. But I guess the things I've seen growing up on TV and books, there's been limited portrayal of maybe kind of South Asian, Indian females in books, TV shows, and wherever it may be in media, I guess, in general. But now if we think about kind of the latest hot topics, Netflix, for example, we have Bridgerton, Never Have I Ever, Heartbreak High, all these kind of bring into light all these kind of amazing South Asian actresses. So things are moving in the right direction if we think about that as a whole. And even kind of, I guess, the Marvel universe, you have things like Black Panther, Shang-Chi, the Eternals, the Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then other films such as like Crazy Rich Asians. So things are branching out slowly, but there's still so much to do, I guess. And I guess it's also important to kind of think about the international hype that's also going on around certain things. One of the TV shows that comes to mind is Squid Game, how that blew up and kind of, I guess, opened people's minds to kind of Korean culture in that sense, representing and making people probably from Korean cultures or from Korea that live here in the UK, London, wherever it may be, feel maybe a bit more comfortable speaking about their culture. People are probably more open to learning about their culture. So I think it's really important when that representation is there in the media. And I think it's always important to consider in the back of our minds, like, do we feel happy with what is being represented in media? Is it based in reality as well? Because I think there's some representation that isn't kind of spot on. You have these stereotypes that are there in TV shows and films and so on, which can in fact then have the opposite intentions of what you probably hoped representation in media would have. So I think there can be the pros and cons there when we think about that. But I do think in general having that representation is really important, not just, oh, we have someone to look up to, but for our mental health. So that sense of not being alone, that sense of like not having that isolation or loneliness there, having someone who might understand you. So this is just, I guess, generalizing it to people in the workforce, people just around you, not necessarily like in media. And another thing, I guess, depending on where you're from, having someone pronounce your name properly, which is something a lot of people probably struggle with, and it gets frustrating to a point where you're always correcting people. And I'll tell you, the amount of the varied pronunciations I've had, it's just like, it's mind-blowing. But I think for me, seeing so much more representation in the media, in the workforce, kind of the changes that are being made, it's felt quite empowering, inspiring, and it feels good. But I guess if I think about the way that I do I feel this way because we don't get it enough? So the changes are happening, but there's still so much more to do, I guess, like I've said before. And then I think it's important for the representation to continue if we think about the younger generation who are going to be exposed to technology and whatever it may be from such a younger age. For example, for me, I didn't have a mobile phone until I was in secondary school. But now you see people in primary school with their iPads or whatever it may be. So So they're more likely to see things a lot earlier than we would have. And if they see this diversity, see this representation there, maybe that will kind of inspire the younger generation to pursue their goals, even if it's outside of kind of a norm, whatever that may be. And it gives that sense of hope. And hope is one of the things I always say to anyone that I work with is important. And kind of, if you don't have hope, then it's difficult to move forward. Hope is kind of that protective barrier, or not protective barrier, where it's empowering and helps you continue working to goals that you've had in mind, despite moments where we might feel quite low, feel at our worst. But having that hope is something that will just kind of keep pushing us in the right direction. So that's one thing I always say. If you, in mental health and kind of the clients I work with, they wouldn't have come to work with me, they wouldn't have come to work with my team if there wasn't a sense of hope there, of kind of things getting better. That sense of my recovery, it is going to happen, things are going to get better, things are going to go well. So I think it's just important to think about why underrepresentation might affect our mental health. Research has shown kind of representation is not just about affirmations, and when we say affirmations, they tend to be kind of statements that express and assert a desire or belief. So apart from affirmations, having that representation kind of has a concrete impact on kind of our biases, which are, biases are assumptions we make without kind of evidence, or kind of we make something normal which shouldn't be normal. So it makes an impact on our biases, our aspirations, so the goals we're working towards, and our mental health. So it shows how key having that representation is. And when groups start feeling kind of invisible or underrepresented, you can struggle to kind of find your place in society. And I think when that happens, you then might experience a sense of loneliness, isolation, kind of where do I belong? Who do I belong with? And it leads to kind of further vulnerabilities of maybe lowered self-esteem. And there's also kind of the racial bias that I mentioned briefly earlier, about how people of colour are represented in media. Is it based in reality? And if people of colour are represented in a certain light, that's inevitably going to kind of affect us and how people might view us as well. So when we have these vulnerabilities, I think it's important to consider we could have one, but it could lead to more, and another, and then it leads to kind of a vicious cycle. So I would urge people to kind of be aware when you realise things aren't going as you planned. If you notice kind of early signs that I'm not feeling that great, it doesn't have to be kind of linked to underrepresentation, but mental health in general. When you're aware that my behaviours change, the way I feel, the way I think, things are changing, this is not my usual self, I would really urge you to kind of reach out for support if you feel comfortable to. And I guess the ways we can kind of do that, I know most universities and University of West London, they have the student wellbeing. So this is how kind of people like us came about. So the kind of counselling services that are available, the mental health support. I know there's kind of contacts for registering with local health services, the welfare teams that are available, careers advice, disability and specific learning disability differences support for care leavers. And if you even think about the different things that I've just listed there, the universities are doing such a great job in kind of tackling diversity and representation. So there's places for kind of people to go when they might need support in a certain area that other people might not necessarily understand. And I think societies as well. There's so many societies at universities, and from what I remember, I think within kind of societies, they tend to have people have kind of select roles. So one of them might be kind of like a welfare officer. So if you feel comfortable enough within your society that you're a part of one, like if you feel comfortable reaching out to them, then that's kind of another thing to do. And I guess on your own, one thing is kind of self-compassion and self-care. So being kind to yourself, treating yourself with a sense of humanity, which sometimes we forget to do. Giving ourselves the love we deserve. we give all this love to other people and we forget to give it to ourselves. So kind of having that positive attitude to ourselves. And when I feel a certain way, when I feel low, when I feel anxious, when I feel kind of just not that great, what can I do that helps me kind of get out of this? Does watching a certain TV show help? Does meeting up with friends help? Does talking to family or friends help? If you have a counsellor, can I reach out to them? Or if you need to, kind of the crisis lines are another step you can take. Like single point of access, Samaritans. There's something called safe space as well. So it's a kind of like a set location where you can go and speak to people who are within kind of the mental health profession. And if I like think about workplaces, they tend to have kind of diversity and inclusion officers. So if there is something you feel worried about in terms of kind of maybe when it links to representation and the team dynamics, for example, you can go speak to people within your workforce. So there's something also called, I think it's speak out or speak up within kind of the NHS trust, but you can start doing kind of, if you're worried about something, it's anonymous. You can anonymously kind of send a message, which I think is really helpful because some people are afraid to speak the truth about certain things that might make them feel uncomfortable, and they might be worried about kind of the backlash of being quite open about something. So that's quite a good thing for people. If anyone in the NHS or if anyone's in kind of any work around that, that's quite a useful kind of service to like keep in mind. And also you have managers, supervisors, colleagues. If any of them you feel kind of comfortable with and trust, you can always kind of reach out to them. There's also wellbeing services, I'd assume, in most workplaces, which is really important to consider if you need kind of that extra support. And I think one of the main differences I've noticed within, especially the NHS, is that they've started to have people from a BAME background on their interview panels. So doing that will hopefully kind of continue a growth in the diversity of the NHS workforce. So yeah, that's kind of everything as they.
Yeah,
And I
I mean,
hope that was helpful.
oh, thank you so much. I mean, yeah, you've given so many tips. It's been really insightful. And I think even when we just look at here at the university and why we're here, people like us, it is we identified this project for community groups that, we know that they might not be coming to our services.
Yeah,
So, and we, we identified this, we have this here, and it's really great that students they have this kind of specialist support, and we recognize that there's something missing.
yeah,
And students can still sign up for the online support for the project if they wish to. There's a link in the bio. And yeah, we really love to get feedback on the sessions and hear from anyone, students at the university, other people if they have questions, and just in the comment section, if you can answer the question, it'd be great, because we would just want to hear from you and make sure that we're creating content that you want. But Ramandeep, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great.
thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.